Picture Rome in 274 AD, hosting the most grandiose triumphal procession in history. Crowds throng the thoroughfares, sunlight gleams off ivory, white marble pillars, and the atmosphere is feverish, bordering on madness. Yet, at the very heart of the parade, a figure emerges that commands an instantaneous hush from the masses.
It is a woman.
She is draped from head to toe in ponderous golden chains, so massive that she requires 2 attendants to support her faltering steps. Around her neck rests a golden collar, yet even as a captive, her gaze remains like that of a solitary eagle in the wasteland, cold, piercing, and inviolable.
Her name is Zenobia.
Tonight, by the rhythmic flicker of the hearth and through this narrative meant to be felt rather than memorized, let us step into the true odyssey of her life. She was the mistress of the Palmyrene Empire, the desert queen who tore a sprawling swath across Asia from the crumbling periphery of Rome. She once led the most formidable cataphracts in blood-soaked charges through the shifting sands, and held vigil with philosophers in the most opulent of palaces. This is a story of ambition, of exotic splendor, and of how one soul confronts the profound stillness of life after the shattering of absolute power. Zenobia's tale begins not with a crown, but beneath the god-forsaken, scorching sun of Palmyra. Palmyra, in the Syrian tongue, the city of palms, was the pivotal oasis of the Silk Road, a nexus of merchants and staggering wealth. Zenobia was no delicate flower of the court. She was raised in the saddle, capable of riding hundreds of miles without a hint of exhaustion. Fluent in a tapestry of languages from Greek to Egyptian, her intellect was like a desert well, deep, shadowed, and refreshing. When her husband Odenathus, the ruler of Palmyra, was unexpectedly assassinated, the city plunged into panic. At this time, the Roman Empire was drowning in the abyss of the crisis of the 3rd century, plagued by internal strife and crumbling frontiers. Zenobia keenly perceived this fissure in destiny. She did not choose tears. Instead, she donned her armor, took her young son by the hand, and stood before her fierce Bedouin warriors. She told her people, "Palmyra shall no longer bow its head, we shall become the sole son of the East." In that moment, her eyes held no hatred, only the chilling calm of one who had mastered the logic of a chaotic world. She realized that so-called empires were but illusions built upon order, and she was prepared to forge a new order of her own. In 269 AD, Zenobia unveiled her long-hidden edge to the world. Leading the Palmyrene host like an unstoppable sirocco, she swiftly swept through Syria and the Levant. But it was her conquest of Egypt that made the world tremble. Egypt, the granary of Rome, the land where Caesar and Antony had once lost their way. Zenobia proclaimed herself the descendant of Cleopatra. She entered Alexandria with an air of legitimacy, bringing the fertile Nile Valley into her embrace. Standing then by the banks of the Nile, watching the churning waters, a temporal illusion may have flickered in her heart. She began to style herself Augusta, the supreme title reserved for Roman empresses. She erected the most magnificent palaces in Palmyra, inviting scholars and philosophers from across the globe. There Hellenistic reason and Eastern mysticism merged in perfect harmony. She delighted in the midnight stillness of her library, listening to the philosopher Longinus expound upon the nature of the sublime. That posture, maintaining a profound reverence for wisdom even at the pinnacle of power, became her most unique allure. She successfully transformed a trading oasis into a gargantuan empire capable of rivaling Rome. Yet, even as she restored glory to the East, the Roman Emperor Aurelian, hailed as the restorer of the world, had already buckled on his cuirass and set his sights upon this rose of the desert. Aurelian's legions were elites forged in the crucible of Rome's desperation, while Zenobia's Palmyrene cavalry were the undisputed kings of the dunes. In 272 AD, 2 of the world's most formidable wills collided violently at Antioch and Emesa. Zenobia appeared personally at the vanguard, her silver helm glinting coldly under the sun. Though her cavalry was peerless in bravery, before Aurelian's ironclad infantry squares, the fluidity of the desert was gradually devoured by the grind of disciplined attrition. The walls of Palmyra shuddered under the thunder of catapults. Standing upon the ramparts, Zenobia watched the Roman tide surge toward her. She attempted to write for aid and maneuver through clandestine diplomacy, but Aurelian's only reply was the icy frost of surrender terms. Zenobia chose to break through. On a moonless night, she mounted a swift dromedary, attempting to cross the Euphrates to seek aid from Sassanid Persia. Yet, fate retracted its mercy at the water's edge. Just as her hand was to touch the damp silt of the far shore, Roman scouts surrounded her. At the moment of her capture, the river soaked her hem. She gazed at her allies shrouded in the shadows of the opposite bank and let out the final great sigh of her life. It was not the wail of the defeated, but the silent acceptance of a grandmaster whose game had reached its end. She was hauled back to Palmyra, the once thriving oasis city which in the subsequent chaos was put to the torch and reduced to a silent wasteland of ruins. Following that earth-shaking triumph in Rome, Zenobia did not suffocate in a darkened cell like so many fallen monarchs. Emperor Aurelian, a commander known for his life of iron and blood, found himself unexpectedly captivated by Zenobia's intellect and aura. He spared her life and granted her an exquisite villa in Tiber, Tivoli, near the outskirts of Rome. There, the erstwhile desert queen laid down her scimitar and donned the silk stolas of a Roman matron. She began to prune vines in her garden and observe the slow crawl of insects in the morning dew. Neighbors would often see this woman of sharp features and deep-set eyes walking quietly along the Appian Way, her bearing touched by a certain melancholy grace. She even married her daughters into the Roman senatorial class, quietly weaving the royal blood of Palmyra into the veins of her former enemies. This silence, of one who saw everything yet kept her lips sealed, was Zenobia's thickest defense in her twilight years. In those quiet afternoons, she might have recalled the scorched palm trees of Palmyra or the cool breeze blowing across the Nile. She once described the essence of power, a thing so brilliant, yet so void, like a silent chess match played within a hallucination. She lived long enough to see Aurelian assassinated and to watch the Roman Empire continue to sway in the storm. In this transformation from ultimate power to ultimate mundanity, Zenobia finally attained a dignity of her own, hard, clean, and unassailable. Zenobia's final appearance in the margins of history occurs in a blurred and uncertain year. She passed away beneath the warm Roman sun. There was no altar, no cheering throng, only the evergreen cypresses of her estate stood witness to her final curtain call. She provided the answer to the question posed in the prologue: were the golden chains heavy? In truth, the heaviest weight was never the chains, but the self that was forced to live burdened by the dream of an empire. When she finally cast off that identity, she truly became herself.
And you, now, do you feel it?
That power, reaching across a millennium, as free and tranquil as a desert wind. The pillars of Palmyra still stand in the Syrian wastes. Though scarred and broken, they radiate an unerasable pride. Zenobia's solitary endgame remains in the deep midnight of history, like a faint lamp that refuses to be extinguished. This is a strength that does not need to roar, the finality of a desert rose. Tonight, may you drift into sleep to the rhythm of Zenobia's footsteps, finding peace in the wake of destiny's whims. The world has fallen silent. It is time for you to let go of the day's distractions.
Good night.